Hello everyone. Here I am just continuing with a couple different tests off of this network sensor that's built off of a Raspberry Pi Zero. I have my laptop over here where essentially I'm going to run an iperf server, and I'm going to use it solely for the purposes of measuring bandwidth throughput from the Raspberry Pi to this laptop that's already been locally connected to the network. So I'll go ahead and essentially start the server on the laptop, and I will run an iperf bandwidth throughput test from the console of the Raspberry Pi Zero. And additionally, I'll run nmon just so that I can get a measurement off of the bandwidth performance of the Raspberry Pi. So there we go. We can see network activity on the right hand side there, and pretty much the input transmit rate. And you can see through the iperf window over here that we're essentially pushing about 52 megabits per second from the Raspberry Pi to the laptop. It's all wired via gigabit Ethernet connections. I'm going to go ahead and just essentially run the same tests the other way around, just to kind of show the performance differences between the laptop and the Raspberry Pi network sensor. So essentially, I'm going to run the server on the Raspberry Pi this time, and go ahead and do a bandwidth test for data being transmitted from the laptop over to the Raspberry Pi. And I'm getting a transmission rate of about, I'd say 90 megabits per second, which is really good. The difference is pretty much half from the network sensor over to the laptop, and that's just due essentially because iperf is going to actually use CPU resources while it's transmitting this data. So if I go ahead and run nmon for the CPU of the Raspberry Pi, you will be able to see the effects of essentially, sending this data across the wire from the Raspberry Pi Zero. There's definitely a significant taxing resources on the CPU of the Raspberry Pi. But nonetheless, definitely a suitable platform for doing network testing across multi-site location networks. So let me go ahead and run that test. And you'll see on the right hand side there the red bar, and pretty much at a maximum transmit rate of about 50 megabits per second. The CPU on the Raspberry Pi pretty much maxes out. Definitely, if you want to get more performance, you would deploy something such as a Raspberry Pi 2 or even the 3 that just recently came out. And you'll definitely be able to do a little bit more in your network throughput testing. Anyhow, all of this data could be actually parsed and gathered and collected into a cloud, and from there you'd essentially present it in a nice GUI. Not very difficult to build. But just wanted to show you some normal iperf testing all across using the Raspberry Pi Zero.